The small town of Evergreen was a place where life moved slowly. Nestled between towering pines and rugged mountains, it was a town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the biggest excitement came from Friday night football games and local fairs. It was the perfect place for someone looking to escape a chaotic past. A place for someone like Jack Thompson. Jack had moved to Evergreen 5 years ago, bringing with him little more than a weathered duffel bag, a few scars that he kept hidden beneath his clothes, and a desire for a quiet life. He found work as a mechanic in a small auto repair shop, where the clatter of tools and the smell of grease became his daily routine. It was honest work, and it kept his hands busy, which was exactly what he needed. His wife, Emily, was the love of his life. They had met 2 years after he arrived in Evergreen. She was a schoolteacher, kind-hearted, and gentle, a stark contrast to the violence Jack had left behind. Emily knew nothing of his past, only that he had once served in the military and that it was something he preferred not to talk about. She respected his privacy, sensing that whatever he had been through had shaped the man she loved, and she accepted him without question. Their life was simple but happy. They lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, where they spent quiet evenings cooking dinner together, talking about their days and planning for the future. To the outside world, they were an ordinary couple living an ordinary life. But under Jack's calm exterior lay a man who had once been anything but ordinary. Jack Thompson wasn't just a soldier, he was a former elite assassin, trained by a covert branch of the military to execute missions that never officially existed. His skills were honed in the shadows, where he had become a master of stealth, combat, and deception. His name had been whispered in fear by enemies who never saw him coming, and remembered only by the ghosts of those who had crossed him. But that was a lifetime ago, and Jack had buried that part of himself deep within. In Evergreen, Jack was just a quiet man with a quiet life. No one suspected that beneath his unassuming exterior lurked a predator with the capacity for lethal precision. No one except the bullies who would soon regret underestimating him. It started on a cold autumn day when Jack and Emily were walking home from the local farmer's market. The streets were lined with golden leaves, and the crisp air was filled with the scent of pine and earth. They were holding hands, laughing about something trivial when a truck roared past, splashing mud onto the sidewalk and onto Emily's dress. The truck screeched to a halt, and out jumped 3 men who Jack recognized as locals. The leader of the group was Randy Grimes, a burly man with a perpetual sneer. Randy was known around town as a troublemaker, a man who got by on intimidation and whose father's wealth had shielded him from any real consequences. He was accompanied by his cronies, Dean and Mike, both of whom seemed to have little will of their own. "Hey, watch where you're going," Randy shouted, his voice laced with mockery as he sauntered toward them. Emily tried to brush the mud off her dress, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Jack remained calm, though his eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed the situation. "We're sorry about the mess," Emily said politely, trying to diffuse the situation. But Randy wasn't interested in apologies. He was looking for trouble, and he had found what he thought was an easy target. "Sorry? That's all you've got to say?" Randy taunted, stepping closer. "Maybe you should be more careful where you walk, lady." Jack could feel the tension in Emily's grip on his hand. He knew that Randy was trying to provoke them, but he had promised himself never to let his old instincts take over. Violence wasn't the answer anymore. He had left that life behind. "Let's just go," Jack said softly, pulling Emily gently toward the path that led home. But Randy wasn't done. "What's the matter, tough guy? Too scared to stand up for your woman?" He jeered, drawing laughs from Dean and Mike. Jack stopped, his back still turned to the men. He felt a familiar stir deep within him, a cold, calculated part of himself that he had worked hard to suppress. He took a slow breath, reminding himself of who he had chosen to be now. "Leave us alone, Randy," Emily said, her voice firm but edged with fear. Randy ignored her. He was too busy enjoying the power he felt over the quiet man who refused to rise to his bait. Come on, what's it gonna be? You gonna let your lady do all the talking?" Before Jack could respond, Randy grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her roughly toward him. She gasped in shock and fear, trying to pull away. That was the moment when something inside Jack snapped. He turned around, his face an unreadable mask, his eyes cold and sharp. "Let her go," he said in a voice that was low and dangerous. Randy, oblivious to the warning, sneered, "Or what?" And that's when Jack moved. In a blur of motion, Jack's hand shot out, gripping Randy's wrist with a force that made the bully yelp in pain. With a swift, precise movement, Jack twisted Randy's arm behind his back, causing him to drop to his knees with a cry of agony. The speed and efficiency of the move left Randy's friends standing in stunned silence. Dean and Mike stepped forward, but before they could react, Jack was already on them. He didn't punch or kick, he didn't need to. A few well-placed strikes to pressure points, a twist of an arm, and both men were on the ground, gasping for breath, their limbs temporarily paralyzed by pain. The entire confrontation lasted less than 10 seconds. Jack stood over the three men, his expression calm but his eyes cold as steel. Emily looked at him, not with fear, but with a mixture of shock and awe. She had never seen this side of her husband, the side he had kept hidden for so long. "Stay down," Jack warned, his voice barely above a whisper, but with a tone that left no room for argument. Randy, clutching his dislocated shoulder, glared up at Jack with a mix of fear and anger. "You're gonna pay for this," he spat through gritted teeth. Jack leaned down, his face inches from Randy's. "No, Randy, you're going to walk away, and you're never going to bother us again. If you do, I won't be as forgiving." There was something in Jack's eyes, a darkness that sent a shiver down Randy's spine. For the first time, Randy realized that he had severely underestimated the quiet man from the auto shop. Jack released Randy, who stumbled back, cradling his arm. Without another word, Randy and his friends scrambled to their feet and hurried back to their truck, their bravado shattered. As the truck roared away, Emily turned to Jack, her heart pounding. "Jack, what just happened?" Jack took a deep breath, the adrenaline slowly leaving his system. He looked at his wife, his expression softening as he took her hand. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. "There's a lot about my past that I haven't told you." Emily searched his eyes, seeing the pain of old wounds resurfacing. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said softly. "But I want to understand." Jack nodded, knowing that the time had come to reveal the part of himself he had tried so hard to bury. That night, Jack told Emily the truth. He told her about the secret unit he had been a part of, the missions that had taken him to the darkest corners of the world, and the lives he had taken in the name of duty. He told her about the nightmares that still haunted him, and the reason he had left it all behind, to find peace, to build a life with her, away from the violence. Emily listened, holding his hand tightly. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she spoke. "Jack, I fell in love with you because of who you are now. I can't pretend that what you did isn't hard to hear, but I understand why you did it, and I know that you're not that man anymore." Jack looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. "I don't ever want to be that man again," he said, "but I will protect you no matter what." Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "And I will stand by you no matter what." Their bond was stronger than ever, forged in the fires of Jack's past and the love they had built together. But the peace they had fought so hard to maintain was about to be threatened. 2 days after the confrontation, Jack noticed unfamiliar cars driving slowly past their house, their occupants watching with interest. He began to see strangers around town, men who didn't fit in with the locals, their eyes cold and calculating. Jack's instincts told him that Randy hadn't let the incident go and that he had called in reinforcements. Randy's father, Walter Grimes, was a man with powerful connections that reached into the criminal underworld. It wasn't long before Jack realized that his past had caught up with him. Walter Grimes was not a man to take insults lightly, especially when they involved his son. Jack's encounter with Randy had set off a chain of events that brought dangerous attention to Evergreen. As the days passed, Jack's unease grew. He noticed more and more unfamiliar faces in town. Men who didn't belong, who watched him with too much interest. These weren't the type of people who would be satisfied with simple payback. They were professionals, the kind Jack recognized all too well. Emily began to notice Jack's tension. He was more alert, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, as if he were expecting something. She asked him about it, but he brushed off her concerns, not wanting to alarm her. But deep down, he knew it was only a matter of time before his past life and the quiet existence he had built would collide. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Jack's phone buzzed with a message. The number was unfamiliar, but the content sent a chill down his spine. "We know who you are. We know where you are. The past is never dead." Jack's heart pounded as he read the message. He had changed his name, buried his identity, and done everything he could to leave that life behind. But somehow, someone had found out who he really was. He glanced at Emily, who was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. Jack knew he had to protect her at all costs. He had hoped to keep her out of the darkness of his past, but now he realized that there was no escaping it. The only way to ensure their safety was to confront the threat head-on. That night, while Emily slept, Jack went into the garage and opened a locked chest he had kept hidden beneath a pile of old tools. Inside were the remnants of his former life, a life he had sworn never to return to. He removed the false bottom of the chest, revealing weapons, gear, and a small black book filled with names and contacts from a world he had once dominated. He stared at the contents for a long moment, his mind racing. He had left that life behind because he was tired of the bloodshed, the endless cycle of violence that had consumed him. But now, to protect what he loved most, he would have to become the man he had tried so hard to forget. As dawn approached, Jack made his decision. He couldn't run, and he couldn't hide. If they had found him once, they would find him again. The only way to protect Emily and keep the life they had built was to eliminate the threat completely. Jack spent the next few days preparing. He made contact with an old ally from his past, a man known only as the Handler, who had once been his link to the shadowy world of covert operations. Through him, Jack learned the extent of Walter Grimes' reach. Walter had hired a small team of mercenaries to track Jack down and take care of the problem. But Jack wasn't just any target. He was a ghost, a man trained to survive against all odds. The mercenaries were skilled, but they weren't prepared for what they were up against. One evening, Jack received the signal he had been waiting for. The Handler had traced the mercenaries to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Jack knew it was a trap, but he also knew that it was his best chance to end this once and for all. He left a note for Emily, telling her he had some urgent business to attend to and that he would be back soon. As Jack approached the warehouse, his senses heightened. The area was quiet, too quiet, and the air was thick with tension. He parked his car a few blocks away and made his way through the shadows, his movements silent and precise. He was no longer the mechanic from Evergreen. He was the elite assassin, the man who had once been a weapon of the state. The warehouse was dark, but Jack's eyes adjusted quickly. He slipped inside through a side entrance, staying low to the ground as he scanned the area. He could feel the presence of the mercenaries, even if he couldn't see them. They were close and they were waiting for him. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the building. "Jack Thompson. Or should I say, Ghost?" Jack didn't respond. He remained hidden, his mind calculating the best approach. He had the element of surprise, but he knew that the men inside were heavily armed and ready for him. The voice continued. "You made a mistake coming here alone, but I suppose that's what happens when you get soft." Jack felt a surge of anger, but he controlled it. He wasn't here to prove anything. He was here to end a threat. Silently, he moved closer to the source of the voice, his body blending into the shadows. In a matter of seconds, everything changed. Jack launched into action, using the environment to his advantage. He disarmed the first mercenary with a swift strike, his movements a blur. Before the others could react, he had taken down two more, their bodies crumpling to the ground without a sound. But these men weren't amateurs. They regrouped quickly, their guns trained on Jack's last known position. Bullets tore through the air, but Jack was already on the move, weaving through the maze of crates and machinery. He knew how they thought, how they would try to box him in, but he was always one step ahead. The leader of the mercenaries, a man with a scarred face and cold eyes, finally stepped into the open, holding Emily at gunpoint. Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He had told her to stay home, to be safe, but somehow they had gotten to her. "Drop your weapon," the leader demanded, pressing the gun against Emily's temple. "Or she dies." Jack's mind raced. He couldn't lose Emily, not after everything they had been through. But he also knew that surrendering meant certain death for both of them. Emily looked at him, her eyes wide with fear but also filled with something else. Trust. She trusted him to get them out of this. "Jack," she whispered, and that's when Jack made his move. In a flash, he dropped his weapon and lunged forward, his hand grabbing the barrel of the gun and twisting it away from Emily's head. The leader pulled the trigger, but the bullet went wide, hitting nothing but air. Jack followed through with a brutal elbow strike to the leader's face, knocking him to the ground. Emily scrambled to safety as Jack finished the job. The leader didn't stand a chance against the full force of Jack's wrath. In a matter of seconds, it was over. The warehouse was silent once again, the threat neutralized. Jack stood over the fallen leader, his chest heaving with exertion. Emily rushed to his side, her eyes filled with tears. "Jack, I was so scared," she said, her voice trembling. Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "It's over now," he whispered. "You're safe." In the days that followed, the remaining mercenaries disappeared, their mission a complete failure. Walter Grimes, realizing that his hired guns had been defeated by the very man he sought to destroy, retreated into the shadows, unwilling to risk further confrontation. Jack knew that the peace he had fought so hard for had been restored, but he also knew that it came at a price. He could never fully escape his past, but he could choose to live in the present with the woman he loved. Emily had seen a side of Jack that she never knew existed, but it didn't change how she felt about him. If anything, it made her love him more, knowing that he would do anything to protect her. Their bond was stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity. They returned to their quiet life in Evergreen, but things were different now. Jack was more vigilant, more aware of the dangers that lurked just beyond the surface. But he also knew that he didn't have to face them alone. As they walked hand in hand through the streets of their small town, Jack felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known in years. The ghosts of his past would always be there. But as long as he had Emily by his side, he knew he could face whatever the future held. The quiet man had once been a deadly force, but now he was something far more powerful. A man with something worth fighting for. And so, in the end, the bullies who had humiliated him learned a harsh lesson. They had underestimated a man who had once been the deadliest weapon in the world. But more importantly, they had underestimated the power of love and the lengths one man would go to protect it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and heartfelt content. Stay tuned for more stories that uplift and inspire. Your support helps us continue sharing these meaningful stories. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next story.